Hello, it's Caitlin, and welcome to Sullivan County 4-H Learn by Doing, Starting Your Veggies Indoors series. So today we're going to talk about all the equipment that you need and a little bit of tips and tricks on how to start your vegetable garden early indoors by seed. So to start off, you'll need whatever you're going to put your seeds in, some kind of medium. You can either get these trays at most any of your home garden stores, and these are biodegradable trays that you can cut apart. You can also use recycled materials to plant in. You can easily cut a bottle apart or a milk jug. You can plant in the bottom portion of it and use the top as kind of your dome cover. You can also reuse a toilet paper or a paper towel roll by simply making 4 cuts in the bottom of it and then folding it up like a box. You can plant your seed in there. You just fill it up with your soil and plant your seed in it, write the name on the outside, and you can even use, again, more recycled material to make your dome this way. Or you can also get some of these little seed pods that come dehydrated and they have the soil already inside them. So you just put water on them, or you add water to them, and in a couple of minutes they grow, and then you can plant your seed right inside them. With these, just make sure that, with most of them anyway, you take the netting on the outside off before you plant them in the ground or transplant them when you go to move them. So those are a couple of things that you can use to start your seeds in. Now, when I am planting in containers, I like to use soilless seed starting mix, and that is optional. I like to use it because it is a little easier on the seedlings. It's a finer textured non-soil medium that you can plant your seedlings in. And the reason why it doesn't have soil in it is because sometimes the soil is a little heavy or a little dense for the seedlings to make their way up through and to germinate in. So this actually contains sphagnum moss or peat moss, sometimes perlite. It depends on the mixture, but most of them will not. If it's a seed starting mix, most of them will not contain actual portions of soil. They also typically don't have the little fertilizer slow release beads in them, and that's because sometimes if you fertilize a little too early before the seedlings have had a chance to really mature, it can burn the seedlings. So it's just a medium that is a little easier on the baby. It doesn't have to work as hard when it germinates to push up through it, but you can absolutely use regular potting soil or even a vegetable potting soil mix for container gardening. You can do that. It might affect your germination rate a little bit. It might stall the germination a tiny bit, but I have used both and have had success with both mediums. So feel free to use whatever is easiest for you to get or to have on hand. So today I'm going to plant with you some bell peppers. These that I'm planting right now are California Wonder peppers, and I like to have a plastic ID tag because I reuse these every year. I can just clean the marker off and use them. I don't put these in my garden though, so I only use them in my seed starting tray, and then I usually use a wooden stake when I put them outside. So I like to write the variety on it, and also in the back, or if you have room on the front, I like to write the date that I planted it so that I know when most of the plants should be germinated. And if my germination rate isn't very good, I have a chance to replant before it's too late and hopefully get some more plants out of it. So that's why I like to put the date on my tags. So let's get started with planting these. Okay, so to start our peppers off, I have already pre-moistened my soil medium that I'm going to be using today. I like to wet the medium before I put it in and before I put the seeds in so that I don't have to immediately water the seeds after I plant them. It tends to not disturb the seed as much, and then when I do need to water it later, hopefully it already started germinating where it stays into the medium a little bit better. So I'm just going to fill the medium make sure that you do this in a place that it's okay if you spill a little bit. And you'll notice that I'm not really packing the dirt down in tight. I don't want to make the median so compact that the seedlings will have trouble pushing up through the median. So I'm very lightly packing it. And as far as how deep we're going to put the seeds, usually if you follow the directions on the back of the seed packet, that will give you your best germination rate. So I'm just going to go ahead and follow the directions on the seed packet for these peppers. And these that I'm using are a year old, but their germination was really good last year, so I'm hoping that I still have a few viable seeds over the season. If you keep your seeds in a nice temperate location, most of the time you can get another year out of your seed packets. So that's nice and full now, and I brought a paper towel to wipe my hands off. I like to try to have as clean hands as possible when I do this next step so that the seeds don't stick to me. I also brought a pencil, again, because I like to keep my hands dry so I can let go of the seeds because they like to stick to you. And you'll notice I'm going about 1/4 inch into the soil as directed by the seed packet. And I like to plant 2 seeds per cell just to try to increase my germination rate. So if one seed doesn't come up, I still have another seed that will hopefully germinate for me left in the cell. But if both of these seeds germinate and I have to leave them in here for a bit before I can transplant them, I might either have to thin out the seeds or transplant one of the seedlings so that they both have room to grow. And now I'm just going to take my seed and drop one in each hole. Now if you are planting in a tray, like what I'm going to be planting, and you have a couple different species that you're planting, like I'm probably going to also have tomatoes in this tray, you want to make sure that their germination rate is about the same, because you're going to cover this with a dome to help kind of monitor the moisture level of the seedlings before they germinate. But if your germination rates are really far apart, then you might have to deal with a dampening off issue. So when about 75% of the seedlings emerge, you need to remove the lid of the dome of your tray so that they don't rot or dampen off. Now I'm just gonna very lightly cover the little holes that I made, and I'm not gonna pack it in too tight again because I want it to be easy for these seedlings to push through. So a little bit more on dampening off is, yes, you do need to remove the top part of your tray when most of your seedlings have emerged so that you don't accidentally rot. If you keep the ones that are up, if you keep your tray pretty consistently watered, then the other seeds that are still working on germinating should still come up without a problem. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to take my tag and I'm going to put it in the front part that has the name, and then the date is on the back so I know where they're planted. And this section is done. So just a little side note on tomatoes, because a lot of people like to start tomatoes specifically indoors. There are a ton of varieties out there, and usually on the back of the seed packet it'll say if the tomato is a paste tomato, so it's good for making sauce, or a good slicing tomato, or cherry tomato if it's nice and sweet, if it'll handle blanching. So look for those descriptions on the back of your tomato seed packet to make sure that it's the type of tomato that you're looking for. But something I also like to pay attention to is if the tomato is labeled as indeterminate, determinate, or semi-determinate. And all tomatoes fall in one of those three categories, and depending on the space you have in your garden, you might want to stick with trying out one of these varieties as opposed to another. So an indeterminate tomato means that it's going to keep growing and it's indeterminate as far as how big it's going to get. It will continue to grow throughout the whole growing season until it gets hit with a heavy enough frost. It'll keep branching, it'll put off a lot of suckers on its branches, and it's an undetermined amount of fruit that you'll get out of the harvest. And these tomatoes can get really large. So if you're trying to do tomatoes in a container, or if you have a really small space that you're trying to grow them in, you might only want to try one of these plants if you want to experiment with them at all, or opt for one of the smaller plants. These should be pruned to really make sure that the plant puts its energy into the fruit that it's producing instead of into growing more and more branches and getting taller and taller. And this type also definitely needs a tomato cage or a stake, something of that sort, to support it because the plant gets so big. But they will continue to flower throughout the whole season. Now, on the opposite side, a determinate tomato, sometimes also referred to as a dwarf or a compact tomato, they tend to be smaller. They grow to a determined size, and they have a more determined expected yield harvest. So you do want to be careful with pruning those, because if you prune too many branches, you might be accidentally pruning some of your harvest. So those are more recommended for container gardens especially, or if you just have a smaller plot of land that you just want to fit more tomatoes in, then a determinate size tomato would probably be a better bet for you. They tend to stay more contained within themselves. And in between the two extremes is a semi-determinate. So they're not going to grow to the extreme of an indeterminate tomato, but they're definitely going to be larger than a determinate tomato, and usually a semi-determinate tomato will also keep flowering throughout the season as well, and might need a little bit of pruning if it starts to get out of hand. So that's just something I like to keep in mind when I'm choosing my tomato varieties, in addition to what I want to use them for. So that's all the content that we needed to cover today for the first episode of starting your seeds indoors. I hope you enjoyed the video and that it inspired you to start your vegetable garden indoors. And remember to follow Cornell Cooperative Extension Sullivan County on Facebook, Instagram, and also subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want notifications when more videos come out. And good luck gardening.